Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Theology Threads. My name is Dr. Brian Jenkins, and I'm going to be joined today by my buddy Miles Langrock. And we're both thrilled to have you with us today as we discover how the thread of the gospel message of Jesus is woven into our everyday lives. Each episode, we will discuss and unpack various ideas, values, and feelings about our world and what the Bible has to teach us. So let's follow the thread together in today's episode of Theology Threads.
I have a statistic to share with you.
All right.
According to a 2017 Barna study, questioning what you believe about religion or God is commonplace for most American adults who would say they are Christian or that they were Christian in the past. 26% say that they still have spiritual doubt, while 40% say they have experienced it in the past but have worked through it. So 2/3 have experienced doubt, and the other third is lying, if you could, if you're tracking with me.
Yeah, probably.
Scripture I would like to share kind of about doubt as well. James 1:6. But let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. So Brian, it sounds like doubt is kind of a big deal here.
Okay, yep.
Should I feel shame if I have these doubts? Because it seems like there's a lot of people who have doubt. Is doubt a sin?
Yeah. So that's coming off of last week's episode. We talk about belief. On the other side of belief, what people think, I should say, is they think that the opposite of belief then must be doubt.
Right.
Where this conversation, I think, becomes critical and where it becomes beneficial is talking about what it means, especially, for example, in the James passage, what doubt means, what it truly means to doubt. In fact, in that James passage that you quoted, let him ask in faith with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. Other translations will say, let him ask with no doubt for the one who wavers. So one of the things to think about, if we're going to talk about doubt, I think it's helpful to, number one, talk about what doubt isn't.
Yeah, define the term.
Yeah, define the term. And then so we're going to talk about what doubt isn't, and then we'll come back and kind of talk about what doubt actually is. So doubt, one of the things that we think of doubt tend to be, well, I'm going to be cynical or I'm just going to be untrusting. I'm a doubter. Like it's this sense of cynicism, and it's almost this sense of this aloof detachment from any sort of commitment to anything. It's this, I guess in some ways, it's almost like this intellectual sort of badge of honor, if you will. Like, oh, I don't fall for anything, or I'm a doubter, or
yeah, I'm not hoodwinked by the something of the day.
Right, I'm not bamboozled. I'm not hoodwinked. I'm not into the flim flam. That sort of thing.
That was a serious. We wasn't in the joke mode
you were
yet.
legitimately using the word hoodwinked?
Yeah.
Oh, well, okay.
That's a word I use.
You don't use the word hoodwinked on the regular.
When I'm on a podcast with Dr. Brian Jenkins, I do.
Hello. So we talk about this idea of cynicism, and then the other one is skepticism. So that's a little bit different. Cynicism is, I think, almost this. It's just this sort of negative version of the question. I refuse to believe anything. And so we become cynical. I don't trust. I don't believe. I don't accept. We talked about that in our last episode, the idea of accepting and choosing and all those things. I'm not going to choose anything. Skepticism would be another form that people often confuse with doubt. And they would say, well, I'm skeptical in the sense of, I think there's a desire to trust, but I just don't want to, or I'm always going to withhold. Cynicism and skepticism, I think, are both forms in some ways of control. I am not going to fully give myself over to something, which is very interesting when we start talking about it, because I think people say, oh, I don't believe in anything, or no belief controls me. I think of, the Rush song, Tom Sawyer, his mind is not for rent to any God nor government. It's this idea that I'm not going to give myself over, which is sort of this very Ayn Rand kind of concept. I'm not going to let anyone tell me who I am, what I'm going to do. And I'm always going to hold that commitment to an idea, either cynically or skeptically. The other thing I think people get wrong about doubt, I guess would be the best way to say it, is that it is in of itself unbelief. And I think that's where people really get the distinction between the process of doubt and maybe what would be unbelief that results in sin. Okay? Unbelief is in itself a conviction. I don't believe this. When I say I don't believe, when I say I have unbelief, it means I don't believe. I am struggling, or I am refusing to believe something. I don't believe in whatever. I'm trying to think of something I don't believe in, but there's things I don't accept, but I don't know. I'm going off the rails here. Like, I don't believe it. Like, someone may say, well, I don't believe in socialism as a form of government. Okay,
Sure.
that's you've chosen to not believe this.
Yeah.
It's not that you have
Unbelief.
doubts.
Yeah.
So you don't have doubts about it. Doubts would say, I don't know. Unbelief is no, I refuse to believe. People say, I don't doubt that there's a God. I don't believe there's a God. Okay, one is a fluidity, one is an absolute. So really, the opposite of belief is not doubt. And it seems kind of, I don't know, to me it seems a little commonplace to say it this way, but I think it's true. The opposite of belief is not doubt. The opposite of belief is unbelief.
Okay.
Therefore, both of which are decisions, both of which have reasoned and have a reason to trust or to withhold trust. So if belief is the acceptance and the investment of trust based on reason and having your own reasons to accept, then unbelief is the decision to withhold that trust. And I've decided that. I do not believe this. In the middle is doubt. Doubt could be seen as the fluid state between those concrete conclusions.
As you're describing it, I think of like almost two sides of a chasm, right? You have a decision here, which is belief.
Right, a definite decision. A resolution.
Yeah, exactly.
That's okay.
And then on the other side, right, something hard and concrete, right? And then on the other side would be unbelief.
Right, and unbelief is a resolution of its own. I am choosing to not believe.
And so doubt would be being in the middle.
Doubt would almost be, I love that illustration, if I may, and I'm going to just add to it a little. Doubt would be the river in the middle.
Okay.
So imagine two river banks.
Yeah, that's a good way to
would be one to say we have one river bank that says a belief of anything. I believe in UFOs, or I don't believe in UFOs. I believe in a flat Earth. I don't believe in a flat Earth. I don't believe in a flat Earth. I don't feel like I have to justify that, but I am a podcaster now, I feel like you need to clarify. We are, and so I feel like you may need to clarify it. Yeah,
kind of exists.
Yeah, and I think we probably just poked some sort of algorithmic bear that's going to come back to haunt.
Algorithmic bear.
Yeah, algorithmic bears.
Is that the name of your
band? No, I think
band?
they're like a band from Vegas.
Yes.
Yeah, I love them. The Arctic Monkeys, Algorithmic Bears. Okay. They actually, Algorithmic Bears, not a lot of people know this, wrote the Theology Threads theme song.
Oh my gosh.
By Algorithmic Bears. Isaac. The Algorithmic
So a river.
Okay.
And two
so
banks.
Think of it this way. We have two river banks.
Two bears.
Two bears. There's a prophet telling them to, okay. So we have these two river banks. Solid ground. Mm-hmm. Both are decisions, both are convictions, both are resolved commitments. Doubt would be that river in the middle, and I may be crossing. It's flooding over. It's the way that I go in between these things, but as long as I'm in the middle, as long as I'm in a phase of doubt, I haven't landed on either. And I think one of the healthiest ways for the Christian to look at doubt would be not that I don't believe, it's that I'm still discovering, I'm still growing, I'm still learning in that. So I think if doubt isn't cynicism or skepticism or even unbelief, I would say what doubt is doubt is the space. It's that fluid space between belief and unbelief.
I like how the illustration took that turn, talking about the river and everything, because that's kind of what the scripture is saying, right? Is the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea.
Right.
It's this kind of uncertainty, whereas the banks are the more concrete, I'm standing on this.
Right. And even this passage, it says, let him ask in faith. So you're going to God and you're asking for something with a full commitment. So when you come to that level of commitment, ask in faith, ask with certainty, resolve it. Because remember, belief is a choice. We treat something, a word like faith, we treat it like an emotion. And I think what James is saying here is don't exist in doubt when it's time to come to God. Make the decision. Because if you exist in doubt in a time of suffering, because again, James is also in the context of persecution and hardship, if you are uncertain in a moment like that, you will in fact be tossed from wave to wave to wave, and you'll be stuck in the middle. And not necessarily that it's sinful,
right,
but it's definitely not beneficial.
Yeah,
James
you can't live.
Yeah.
You can't live in that that space.
Right. James is encouraging the listener, if you will, to push the metaphor farther, to come up onto the riverbank. Make the decision, come up onto the riverbank. Don't stay in that fluidity of doubt.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So the world will have an antidote or an answer to that doubt.
Yeah.
What would you say that the if we don't have Christ or the Holy Spirit, something, a guiding principle like that, what is the world's way of trying to find certitude or get out of doubt?
Yeah. So I think and that's kind of secular thinking, if you will. So if we want to draw like this really rough line.
Let's do it.
Yeah, this really rough line between, let's just say, the sacred and the secular, okay?
Yeah.
The secular mindset, typically, philosophically, the way to deal with doubt is really, number one is cynicism, to doubt everything, right? So if I can't be certain about anything, if I can't be certain about some things, I shouldn't be certain about anything, right? So I've got a quote here. Descartes said, "If you would be a real seeker after truth, it is necessary that at least once in your life you doubt, as far as possible, all things." So the idea is that doubt is this elevated virtue of process. In other words, what I mean by that, or process of virtue, in other words, that the process of doubt can lead you to resolution.
Right.
It can lead you to confidence. It can lead you to a sense of knowing, a certitude. That is theoretically ideal, but it exists with us. That means that everything I come to, I'm going to be cynical or skeptical about. It leaves out earnestness. It leaves out just, I'm ready to go in. And if we don't bridge over that, if we don't look past it and we don't settle into that, then we'll always be, again, tossed. That doubt will flood in and come in everywhere. We have something like cynicism. We have other things like bravado. I may be full of doubt, but I'll never let you know. So I will just extend like I am absolutely confident and I am totally assured of what I am saying and what I am doing.
So bravado being this kind of false image we project.
Of confidence or
confidence.
conviction. Yeah.
So I'm not really addressing the doubt. I'm just going to pretend that I have this.
Yeah, and I'm going to fight against it in such a way that I will do whatever I can to hide the doubt that's actually going on. Because there's now that way, the bravado approach is assuming a negative thing about doubt, okay? So cynicism overly values doubt. It elevates doubt as almost a religious virtue, like joy and peace and kindness and generosity and doubt, okay? Mm-hmm. Bravado drives it down to where it's so wrong, it's so evil.
It's a weakness.
It's a weakness.
Yeah.
That's even a better word. You got it right. I didn't. It's a weakness of character, and I can't let anyone. I can never let them see you sweat. Never let them know you have a question.
There's no crying in baseball.
There is no crying there in fact is no crying in baseball. I didn't know that's actually true. It's in the movie, the documentary, A League of Their Own. Anyway, okay.
I just know Tom Hanks said it at one point.
Yeah, it's a movie. It's not really a documentary. I was joking.
Oh.
It's a great movie, though. Anyway, so that's bravado. But anyway, it's silly and we're joking, but that is bravado.
Yeah.
That at no point will the weakness of my convictions ever be seen. Well, that tends to make you into a really, really insufferable person to be around. I don't know if you've ever been around someone who is absolutely convinced of their sheer smugness and how right they are. I really don't like how you were looking at me while I was saying that, Miles. I know it was going through your mind just then.
Sometimes, the joke just fits so much.
No, I served that up. I served that up.
I don't actually believe that. I'm not certain of it neither. But no, that was just, it was funny
but
enough.
think about people who are like, have you ever met anyone seriously that is just absolutely inflexible in what they believe?
Yeah, it's like, they're this puffed up personality. Nothing can be challenged. It's just everything's they're always certain about it. Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. There is a G.K. Chesterton quote about certainty and like madness. And if we can find it, we'll throw it in the secondary content, the what did we miss content.
Can we ask
we'll get
someone
the
to
quote
pull it
right.
up?
They're working on it right now. And if we're still talking about it, maybe. But the idea behind this quote is the only people who are absolutely certain are the insane. Like only a madman is absolutely certain about everything. Yeah,
there's a good thought there too. Is that the amount of I've heard it said this recently. Like the amount of different things that can be attributed to one explanation.
Yeah.
and you're certain, like you have a certainty that this one thing is the reason why this happened and this happened, this happened, this happened, just, proves that you may have not have thought about, life in general. And
Yeah. And it shows a lack of sort of living through it and processing through this idea. The quote is saying, nothing is certain by uncertainty. In other words, you can't be uncertain. You can't be certain to get there through uncertainty. And we'll actually cover that, I think, probably by the end when we get there. So you have cynicism, which is this overinflated doubt as a religious, almost a near religious virtue. You have bravado, which is I reject doubt as an absolute weakness. And then there's this other thing, which is that form of the general anxiety of life, which is that level of uncertainty in which everything in my life is now defined by doubt. So one is I refuse to acknowledge doubt at all. The other one is I praise my doubt, particularly intellectual doubt, as a virtue that actually makes me better than other people. But then you have this sense of anxiety that leads my doubt into thinking, or that drives my doubt to say that there's absolutely nothing that I can be certain about at all. And all of those in some ways are an insufficient way to live. And we talked a little bit about that in our previous episode. You can go back and listen to it, because it affects relationships. It affects the quality of life. And that's why doubt kind of becomes dangerous in that secular way. Now, in the sacred way, in the religious way, doubt also introduces some struggles as well. Because oftentimes, unfortunately, doubt in the religious world is met with judgment, or it's met with fear.
Right. Maybe one of the reasons why only two-thirds even admitted to having doubt, while the other third is like, no, how could I ever? Because I find that kind of fascinating that a third of, according to
that seems
this
awfully
study,
high.
Yeah. You've never had any doubt,
right?
Mm-hmm. And I feel like we live in an age where there's an abundance of information, an abundance of choice. Mm-hmm. And because of that, you have all these options, and we don't know if there's truth to this or truth to that. Maybe there's a lack of confidence in our institutions, our workplace, our future. And so it feels like doubt, and maybe that's what that article is trying to address, is that there may be kind of a rise in doubt within unbelief. Is that a fair assessment of?
I mean, socially, I don't know. I think there's all sorts of factors as to why, number one, just the idea of saying doubt out loud may be more socially acceptable than it ever was. The other one, I do think what's interesting, though, Miles, is you touched on that, because I hadn't considered that. It's just the sheer access to different worldviews and how that overabundance of choice could actually undermine certitude. Because a big part of the Christian's doubt, the believer's doubt, and I think if we're honest about it, we're honest with the guy listening right now, or, maybe there's someone and you're doing your laundry, you're folding clothes and you're listening, or you're driving over the mountains, to go, or you're in the car, or you're with family or whatever. And this idea of my uncertainty is simply because how could I possibly know this for sure?
Right.
I know people who are good, moral, loving people who disagree with me, and they don't believe what I do. How dare I think I'm right?
Right. You come off, not you specifically, but
apparently I do.
Sorry, I'm not saying this.
All right.
But from perhaps that person's perspective, that's that bravado we're talking about. They see that, they feel as if, how could you be certain about something where there's so many different people that say this is the way, or this is what you ought to believe. And I read on the internet, and there's like 20 different opinions about one, topic. But here you're certain that there's, what we read in the Bible has some validity to it, or that Christianity is the superior belief system. And so, that comes off very bravado-ish.
Yeah, I could see that, because when I get up there, and like I said last week, and it sounds like I may say it every single week, when I say that I personally feel that Christianity is a superior worldview, absolutely, that sounds like, who do you think you are?
Right.
What right do you have? And the truth is that's a relatively recent way of even looking at things, that one person had the right to challenge. Things were simply true, and you either agreed with it or you didn't. Now that we live in a worldview and a system that says I get to determine what is true, there's a high degree of freedom, but there's also this huge chasm of doubt and anxiety, because no one, culture, the world, the people around me, the society, the world around me is not answering every question for me anymore. I have to answer every question for myself now.
Yeah, that's a big responsibility.
Yeah, it's a massive intellectual and
like,
spiritual responsibility.
Yeah, because you have to define, you gave 4 principles: the origin, my purpose, like
ethics and destiny.
Yeah. So I'm the person who's responsible. Wow, that would create a lot of anxiety in my life, because I don't, how could I know, like, who am I, how qualified am I to make those, decisions for myself, to say that that's where we all come from, or this is why my destiny lies here. So, and
I'm choosing it. I'm choosing my destiny. I'm choosing my ethics. I'm choosing my purpose and my meaning. I mean, even this, the Buddha once said, doubt everything, find your own light. So that comes from the Buddha, now, which is interesting because Buddhism is a worldview.
Yeah.
Buddhism is a presentation of a concise and cohesive worldview that attempts to answer those 4 critical questions. And even at the center of it, where it's saying all life is suffering, or all life is the brokenness of the world, and you have to transcend it, and all of its teachings, at the heart of it is its very founder saying doubt everything, including, so if he's saying doubt everything, is he meaning doubt everything, including the call to doubt? Sure. If I'm doubting everything, then now, and to go back to Chesterton, you cannot get to certainty from uncertainty.
Yeah, if I'm drawing from my world religion class in high school, it's that to attain enlightenment is to like get above this, cyclical, this it's like the Matrix, right? It's like, there's this thing that's happening and it's not real, and so to transcend it, you have to understand and comprehend that it's not real. Become one with the nothingness outside of this, which is...
but yes, and even in the interior of it is the challenge to even doubt, is that true? Like, where are the handles that we can grab and build our life on? If we look at that doubt as a sea, as a fluid sea, at least pick a shoreline and start there. Now we can work. Now we can move. I remember growing up in Arkansas, we would do these river rafting trips down the White River.
Dangerous.
In Arkansas. Yes, it's very dangerous.
Dangerous stuff.
Was that?
I said it's dangerous stuff.
Oh, I thought you were being like, dangerous. Oh, Arkansas.
No, I'm serious.
Hey, hillbilly redneck boy.
No.
Sorry, people from Arkansas get a little sensitive.
No, rivers everywhere are pretty bad.
Yeah, that's true. So it's in the White River in Arkansas, the Buffalo River, and you'd float down them.
Yeah.
And there's nothing worse, really, when the rapids get bad and you tip over. I don't care which shore you wind up on. If you're in the middle in those rapids, that's the danger. That's the chaos. You are praying that even if I wash up on the opposite shore, at least I'm landed somewhere and I can now change in perspective. And when we have everything in our society, the worldview around us, and sometimes even in religion, saying you can't admit that you're drowning, because it's not the drowning that's the problem, right? It's you can't admit it. I can't admit that I'm flailing around in this middle ground. And when religious people, Christians even, say doubt is sin and it's wrong and I judge you, now I'm either getting judgment from a brother or sister in Christ, or I'm afraid of my own doubt.
Right. I think of maybe an instance where someone would confide in a pastor or a leader or something like that, say, hey, I'm having these doubts. And instead of being met with like, a life preserver, or like, something like, hey, let me help you through this. Like, let's talk about it. It's like, why are you even in the river, man?
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be there.
Right.
And there's that shame that comes, well, I'm never going to tell that guy again.
Yeah. It's that God said it, I believe it, that's enough. And let's be honest, Christians, brothers and sisters, it's not enough for a lot of people. Apparently it's not enough for the 63% of people that are telling us the truth. It's not enough that there is a wrestling that's intended, that there is a process that's intended. And if we as Christians can't have discussions like this, or even Dr. Brian Jenkins, whatever that means, has said, yes, there's been absolute times where I've looked up into the heavens and a big question mark appeared in the stars, not a cross. Everyone's like, Constantine looked up and he saw a cross with a shield with a cross on it. I think like I looked up and I saw a question mark. Like I was looking, I don't know, I just thought of the Riddler for a second, but I just think of these things.
I love all these.
I mean, think about it. And we can't do that. Why can't we say, by the way, and I know we're going to get there eventually, so let's just jump there and get there. Mm-hmm. The Bible is full of people who are asking these questions.
That was my very next question.
Yeah.
What does Christianity teach us about the nature of doubt?
I think the overarching biblical theme towards doubt, and what we'll do is I'm going to say this up front, and then we'll walk through some passages, is walk with doubt. But doubt is not your guide. Doubt is a companion that you have to walk with.
It's not your guiding virtue.
Doubt is not your guide.
Yeah.
And I'll get to a little bit more of that in a second. So we can start to look at a biblical thread of doubt. One of the first sort of negative experiences of doubt is in the Garden of Eden, when Satan, the devil, the snake, tempts Adam and Eve. And he starts by saying in Genesis 2, did God really say?
Yeah, it's a clever question.
Yeah, because it's not saying God's wrong.
Right.
Right? And I'm right. So rather than attacking belief with contrary belief or unbelief, it erodes belief by introducing doubt. Did God really say? So let's push that metaphor of belief being a coastline and doubt being a river. That's an example of doubt eroding the shoreline.
Yeah.
So rather than the shoreline being a buttress or a barrier to the doubt, it erodes it. And in that moment, Adam and Eve, and I don't want to get into the metaphysical realities of destiny and all that kind of stuff, but let's just say it's you and me talking about something and doubt is introduced. I now have a choice to say, am I going to let this question push me up onto solid ground, or am I going to let the question erode the ground from underneath me? Does that make sense how I'm saying that?
Yeah. I think right. The doubt, it's okay to wrestle with the doubt, but if it's eroding your belief in something, then you should maybe be concerned. You'd have to kind of distinguish those two.
Yeah.
It might be difficult to distinguish those
because
two.
maybe there are some beliefs I have that should be eroded.
Right.
That should have doubt introduced into them. I think of, honestly, growing up in the South, being around a lot of ethnic racism, white nationalism, things like that. And the thing that's a worldview that needs to be eroded. That's a worldview that needs to be washed away. And what does that? Contact with people, introducing doubt. Is this really true anymore? Through experience and teaching and ideas and feelings and moral decisions, all that kind of stuff. So there is a process by it. That's why I would start with walk with doubt, but don't let it be your guide. Like, don't be afraid to walk with it, but it shouldn't be your guide. So I think of some biblical patterns. So we have Genesis 2, and then we jump up to, I think one of the really craziest stories in the Bible is in Judges, and it's the story of Gideon.
I was going to bring Gideon up.
Yeah, Gideon is a wreck. So just so you know, Gideon, it's funny because Gideon's supposed to, he's Gideon. Gideon's a wreck. Like Judges chapter 6, verse 11. Now the angel of the Lord came, sat under the terebinth, which is like a tree, at Ophrah, not Oprah.
Yeah,
Ophrah. Always be careful.
Yeah.
Which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, Joash. And his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites. So let's start where he's at. He's trying to thresh his wheat in a pit.
Yeah.
Because he's so scared. So he is starting from a place of absolute anxiety. So if we talk about cynicism, bravado, and anxiety, and if you're listening on the podcast, I'm doing very constructive things with my hands are nailing it.
But orchestra.
It's really laying out very logically for those.
I'm a visual learner, so that's actually very helpful.
Yeah, and everyone who's not is just really upset right now. So he's in the threshing floor. He's moved in his wine press. It's completely inefficient. This is not God's man of faith and power. This is someone who's starting from a place of anxiety. Okay. Then the Lord, this is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. The Lord is with you, O mighty man of valor. And I just get this sense that Gideon does like a me?
Yeah.
Me? I'm a mighty man of valor. He says this, please, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us?
Which is a question, right? That it's a reasonable question.
It's a completely reasonable question, but it is a doubting question. It's not a question of unbelief. He doesn't say, hey, angel, even though you're standing in front of me, I don't believe in you. He doesn't say God has rejected us. He asks the doubter's question, which is why? Why? And we, as Christians, tend to be terrified of the why.
Afraid of the why.
And I think that is one of the worst mistakes we can make. I'll just say for you and I in our industry as pastors, and I know not everyone listening is a pastor, and I understand that, but you are a parent.
Yeah.
You're a coworker, you're a friend, you're a father, you're a husband, you're a mom, whatever. Someone's going to look at you and say, why? And your first inclination is probably going to be to panic. is to say, I don't know. And why? Because I don't know either. And now this doubt, which had the opportunity to strengthen, is now starting to erode two hearts. So that Gideon's there and he's in a place of fear. The angel shows up and he's like, I know who you are. You're a mighty man of valor. And even though an angel says it to him, he still doesn't believe it.
And isn't it the angel of the Lord too?
Yeah, and that's a whole theological thing about when the angel of the Lord appears. Yeah, that's a whole thing, Miles, and we'll come back to that. So make sure you subscribe and get notifications.
You know what?
Like what I did there?
You know, I envy the listener right now because they can just jump ahead to the next episode that
no, not if they're listening to the first
true.
time.
They're listening in real time.
And
but let's
envy's
say
a sin.
a month. What's that?
Envy's a sin.
Envy's a sin. Okay, all right.
Okay,
well,
all right. Okay.
I'm a sinner.
So he says, where are all his wonderful deeds that our fathers recounted us, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? And this is what he says. He says, hey, why is the Lord has happened to us? And by the way, where's all the great stuff that's supposed to happen? Gideon is telling this messenger of the Lord, God's messenger, saying, hey, quick question. What's going on and when do I get the good stuff? And the angel says, Gideon, you are the good stuff.
Yeah.
You, even in your doubt, you are the answer to your own question. What I'm about to do in you will be the answer to your questions of doubt.
But that wasn't sufficient for him.
No, it wasn't, because he does this other thing. And this is, again, I love this story. He says this, please, Lord, how can I save Israel? Behold, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house. So he says, I'm in this small, insignificant country. My tribe, my family, is one of the smallest, most insignificant tribes. Mm-hmm. And I am in the smallest, most insignificant household, family of that tribe. And I'm down here. He's saying, I'm the biggest loser on the face of the earth. That's what he's saying. How can I am literally the worst possible person you could have picked.
Can I do something real quick right here? It's an inverse of what Paul does in his letter, I think it's to the Philippian church, where he says, I was the greatest.
Yeah, I was the chief of sinners. Yeah.
Well, what he was saying was,
I was a Pharisee of Pharisees.
Yeah, I was of the tribe of Benjamin, circumcised on the 8th day. So either way, whether you're the
most
least
religiously,
of these, or the greatest.
Perfect.
God
Look at what he does.
Yeah.
The doubt and the insufficiency is still there. Paul was religiously, morally, one of the greatest people. He's checked every single box. Mm-hmm. And you have Gideon, who's an absolute dumpster fire of a human being. And God uses both of them mightily. And both of them, by the way, struggle with doubt.
Wow.
Because Paul even says, I have to boast in my weakness because there are parts of me that haven't caught up with my spiritual belief, and I'm struggling in this. So I'll just be excited about my weakness because I know God will show up.
Yeah, and he says, too, that all those things I count as rubbish for the sake of knowing
I'm just going to throw them away because they don't matter in that sense. So Gideon goes on, he says all this stuff, and then Gideon finally says, okay, so I saw an angel, you called me out, you said I'm the solution, and he says, could you give me a sign? And he makes him a little cake, and the angel burns it with his finger.
A cake?
Yeah, like a little cake.
Oh.
Yeah, it's right there. It's in the Bible. You can look it up.
I'll trust you.
Later. Okay, so that's Old Testament Gideon. Jesus has some conversations about doubt, and one of the most famous is his encounter he has with a guy whose child is demon-possessed.
Yeah, so Mark 9,
23,
24. This is one that when we investigated the idea of doubt, was one that first came to my mind, right? Because he says... you may have the passage in front of you. Okay.
Yeah.
You mind if I take a look at it?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, perfect. So Mark 9. Oh, where's the 20? There it is. Okay. So Jesus is saying all things are possible for one who believes, right? Which is great. He's kind of encouraging this man.
Which seems, by the way, forgive me for the interjection, but it does seem like Jesus is saying, don't doubt.
Yeah,
he's saying if you didn't have any doubt, this would be possible. All things are possible for him who believes.
And if we just kind of if we don't take the thread.
If you don't take the thread,
and
if you just look at
that one
verse,
passage,
right.
then this is the club that, spiritual leaders and pastors have taken to, so many people. And so it goes on to say, immediately the father of the child cried out and said, I believe, help my unbelief. And that is just, I think it's poetic.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to know your thoughts. What does that phrase mean, help my unbelief?
I think, and I think what the Father is saying in that moment is he is maybe the only truly intellectually honest person in the Bible other than Jesus. Because look at what he says. Jesus says all things are possible to him who believes. No one believes more than Jesus. Therefore, all things are possible to Jesus. Jesus knows this has happened because he totally believes in the Father who has sent him. What's interesting is if you roll this passage back, other people tried to cast the demon out of this child and they couldn't. And Jesus' response to them was he called them a faithless generation.
Was this his disciples?
No, it was teacher, I brought my son, whoever sees it. I asked your disciples to cast it out and they were not able. So it was people who followed him, whether it was the disciples or his disciples.
Sure.
So he said they couldn't do it. And he says, oh, you faithless generation. So we have right here the difference between believing and unbelieving and how it plays out in this young person's life. The Father then says, I see the difference and I recognize the difference. So I'm going to ask that the part of me that believes is asking for help with the part that doesn't believe. And that's the perspective. That's the prayer. The prayer is not, I don't believe, so I'm going to chuck it all. It's there's a part of me that believes, and I'm going to I'm going to pull, I'm going to let the part of me that believes, that's not cynical, that's not full of bravado, that's not anxious, that's not, that's just not pretentious, that's not superior. I'm going to let the part of me that genuinely trusts in Jesus in a humble but certain way, and I'm going to let that part pull me up. That's going to pull on my unbelief. That's what's going to pull me over the river from one side of the bank to the other. And I'll have to wade through doubt to get there, but I'm anchored not to my unbelief. I'm anchored to my belief. Now help this middle gap. And the guy's just honest.
Yeah.
It's so powerful because he's just honest.
Well, he's kind of broken,
Mm-hmm.
His son has I think an unclean spirit, mm-hmm. I feel like you can almost hear the desperation in his voice.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're desperate, I feel like that's where sometimes people have to hit rock bottom. That's an expression, right? That's when they're willing to admit, okay, I don't have it all together.
Right.
There's some serious doubts. And then there's that, casting a line or like,
right.
I need a lifeline out of this doubt. I'm gonna take a chance.
Right.
And if you're always, we were talking about doubt being your guiding virtue. If doubt's your guiding virtue, if it's only the scientific method and everything has to be test, measure, and believe, how can he test, measure, and believe that? How can he has to take that kind of leap to be able to say, wow, there may be something here.
Yeah, and he's choosing.
Right.
I think getting back to that idea, I know we talked about that in our last episode. You can go back and find it. But in this, coming back to that idea that this belief value is a choice. And you have, it's going to sound really weird. And I know there are Christians who will disagree with me on this, and they can disagree.
They can listen to more theology
they can listen
threads.
to more theology threads, but they can do all, I believe you have a choice to believe that you can say, I, in this moment, am going to choose to believe. And you say, well, our will is corrupted. Yes, all of that's true. And you can choose to believe it. You can choose to attach yourself to the things you know, or at least believe, and use that to buttress against the tides of unbelief.
So Jesus doesn't say to the man.
Yeah, and look at Jesus' reaction.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump on where you go, but look at Jesus' reaction.
You're just excited, man.
I am, because look at Jesus. Jesus doesn't say, come on, dude.
Yeah.
The guy says, I believe, help my unbelief. And he doesn't say, dude, bro, come on.
This was your moment to believe, man.
You could have stepped up. You choked.
This is your kid. Don't you care?
Yeah, don't you believe enough for your own child? And by the way, we're kind of being silly, but pastors, our industry, we have said some really, not you or I, hopefully, but our industry have said really harmful, hurtful things to people in desperate situations. If you would only believe more, if you only had more faith. And that's the best of it. Sometimes it's, well, if you just give more, if you just serve more, if you just did. And we turn now this thing of belief into legalistic works of devotion that should result in manipulating God to do what we want. And now we're all over the map. What does Jesus do? Jesus says, okay. He just says it. He said, Jesus saw the crowd had come. He saw it was there. He goes, come on out. Jesus doesn't chastise. Why? Because Jesus is as concerned for that father's faith as he is for the young man, but Jesus is focused on the young man. And he delivers the young man at the same time he responds to the father. He doesn't judge. And by the way, he doesn't judge a young man for having this unclean spirit either.
Right.
Sorry, bro. Sorry, kid. I don't know what black magic your parents were into, but that's on you.
Ouija boards.
Yeah,
Come on, man.
yeah. I mean, who knows what books they let you read or movies or whatever. I'm not going to say it. I know what you're trying to do, and you're not going to do it.
What are you talking about?
I'm too smart for you. Okay. But we're not going to do any of that. But what does he say? He says, you're right. We're here now, so let's deal with it. You've got enough because at least you're admitting that you believe something about me, and the kid's not going to suffer, and he does it.
Yeah. I'll be honest, when we talk about these passages, especially like Gideon, we didn't get into Thomas, but Thomas is another example of doubting. I always personally felt like I was that guy. Like, I have these, I had these doubts or, curiosities. I'd say more so curiosities. And so I feel like I've heard sermons or messages or maybe something in passing where, it was, you should feel shameful about that doubt or that curiosity. Mm-hmm. And so I felt like I was on the defense a lot in those moments. Going back to that question, should we feel shameful about our doubt?
I don't think so. In my opinion, I don't think so. It's interesting because there's a quote from Galileo where he says, I do not believe that the very God who granted us reason would expect us to forego its use.
Ooh.
And what he means by that is he's saying, why would God have given us a way to think about things if he didn't want us to, in fact, think about things?
Right.
I think the most powerful question any of us can ask is why. But when we ask and be prepared for the answer. That's what James is saying. Because he says, let any man who lacks wisdom ask God for it. But when you ask, be ready for the wisdom that God brings. Because if I don't want to believe and accept and trust, remember that was last week's episode, believe and accept and trust the wisdom that God's going to bring, then I will in fact be wavering around. We have one of my favorite paintings, The Great Wave. And part of that is to remind me of, people always think that it's a picture of a wave. It's actually a picture of Mount Fuji, right? And we'll probably put it on social media and in the chat so people can know what I'm talking about. We'll highlight it later. It's a picture of Mount Fuji with the wave. And that's how we look at life.
Right. It's way back in the background.
Yeah, you can see in the back. But the wave, that's how we look at it. The wave is bigger than the mountain, that the wave is bigger than the rock. No, in perspective, the truth is Mount Fuji is way bigger than that wave. But in the moment, the wave seems bigger. And that reminds me that in the moment, my doubt can seem like the biggest thing, but the rock, Jesus Christ, is far greater. That the mountain, the hill of Calvary, Mount Zion, is far greater than my wave of doubt that I'm riding. And I look to that mountain. I look to that. And you say, oh, Brian, that just sounds like religious, whatever. Of course it is. And I choose to believe it. I'm not a psychopath. I'm not a crazy person. I'm not an intellectual child. I know, and I believe it. You know what? I don't even know it. Forget knowing it. I believe it, because what you believe is always more powerful than what you know. And so that's what I hope people find, is look past. Yes, the wave is there. Don't deny that it's there, but look past, look to the shore, look to, yeah. You see all the Tolkien stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, you see all the Tolkien stuff. And I just always think of that moment, look to, in 3 days' time, look to the west. Look to the west. And it's a big theme in Tolkien of looking to the west. And it's this idea that there's this help unlooked for. It's this massive theme in J.R.R. Tolkien. And it's just look to the west, keep your eyes up, don't give up. And an answer does come. And it comes in Jesus Christ. And you mentioned Thomas, and I don't know if we're getting close here, our time moderator, but.
Yeah, I think I do want to move towards, you're talking about looking to the west. And that's a big moment, I think was it the Battle of Helm's Deep?
Yeah.
So there's that. And then they come in and basically the battle's won, I think, at that point. So there's a resolution to the doubt, right? And I feel like, me reflecting on my own life and, maybe you as yourself, there's some kind of emotions associated with that.
Yeah, for sure.
So for you, Brian, if I may, how has doubt played a significant role in your life? And what can you tell me about those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever really struggled with doubt was I was in high school, and is when we had just moved from Arkansas to California, and I was in my science class, and it was like an advanced science class. I'm kind of a nerd, Miles. I don't know if that's coming across, but and I was in this advanced science class, and we were talking about God and faith and religion. I'm a church kid. I grew up in church, Pentecostal church kid. Glad to be it, proud of it. I love that God has allowed me to be raised in the Pentecostal faith. And I was finally like taking a stand, and these godless California pagans, that sort of thing. And there I was amongst
we do love you, California.
Yeah, we do love you, California. But the godless granola, you were out there, right? And so this young woman, this girl in my class, we were talking about it, and I made my stand for faith. And she looked at me, she said, "I don't understand how someone as smart as you could believe something so dumb." And I folded. I folded like a cheap suit. I folded like a house of cards. Whatever metaphor about folding, I folded like origami.
Folded like laundry.
Like laundry, I folded. And that set off my first true crisis of faith. It took me about 1.5 years to get out of that. And I've had a few more along the way. But that was the one, because I realized that I'd never really put my feet solidly on the bank. I was just in a really calm river, right? And I was confusing the placid nature of growing up in a Christian home and in a Southern Christian church environment and in the Midwest and all that. I confused that placid little lazy river with being solid ground. But the second I hit the rapids, I was done. The second the water actually got tough, I was done. And that began my journey of finding solid footing and finding my place on the bank. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I've come back to that place. I don't want to make anyone, Brian's resolved. No, I've come back to that place and had to reassert through God's grace, through the cross, through his grace in my life, but I had to reassert that commitment to belief.
Well, when life, kind of throws its difficult moments at you, it probably takes you back to a place where you have to know that this is what I believe.
Yeah. I choose to believe this. Because it's not really faith until the first time you don't want to believe it and you choose to. Now it's faith.
Yeah, it's real.
It's real. Before it was just agreement.
Yeah.
It's like I tell married couples all the time, you're not really married until the first time you don't want to be married and you stay married. Now you're married.
Yeah.
And I think that commitment to Jesus is the same. Now it's faith. Now it's conviction. Now it's commitment. For sure.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
Is there, if we were to summarize today's episode, what's the one thing we should know about doubt?
I think that we'll talk about like if I'm in a, you know what I'm going to do? It's a verse from Jude. Jude's one of the final books of the Bible. It's right before the book of Revelation. It's only one chapter, so it doesn't have chapters and verses. It just has verses. And verse 22 of Jude says this: "Have mercy on those who doubt, and save others by snatching them out of the fire. To others show mercy with fear, hating even this garment stained by the flesh." Have mercy on those who doubt. And I just like to say, God has mercy on those who doubt. We should have mercy on those who doubt. Christianity should have mercy on those who doubt. C.S. Lewis talks about faith being like a big house, and each of us has found our little rooms. And to paraphrase C.S. Lewis, he says, we should have more patience for people who are still in the hall. And the hall is that place. I'm just glad you're in the house. And maybe you're in the hallway and you're trying to figure out Pentecostal or Baptist or charismatic or evangelical or whatever. Man, I'm just glad you're in the house, and we'll figure it out from there. But walk with faith. Walk with doubt. Don't let it be your guide. Don't be shackled to it. And really, when you're in that moment, just pray the doubter's prayer. When you're in that darkest pit, just whatever it is, that conflict, whatever, just say, I believe, now help my unbelief.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us. Please take a second to like and subscribe for notifications. Follow us on social media and leave a 5-star review on your podcast app so others can find us. Anything else, Pastor Brian?
That's it.
Wonderful.
Let's go.